On July 16, 2026, Bitsight will deploy a comprehensive revision to its global scoring mathematical model, the 2026 Ratings Algorithm Update, or RAU26. This update executes a structural recalibration of how organizations are graded, on both their vulnerability management and their email security protocols. This creates an immediate operational tension for administrators handling vendor risk management, or VRM, and security performance management, or SPM. On July 16th, even if an organization's underlying security infrastructure remains completely static, their overall Bitsight rating and risk factor grades will change. This split-screen dashboard visualizes the exact same raw data flowing into both sides. On the left is the legacy algorithm, and on the right is the new RAU26 architecture, generating distinctly different final grade outputs based on 3 core methodological changes. The first architectural change occurs in the email security module. The DMARC risk vector transitions from a purely informational, ungraded metric into an actively graded, rating-impacting variable. Second, the existing patching cadence metric is entirely replaced. The new logic, named Critical Vulnerability Management, abandons a strict linear graph in favor of a dynamic severity matrix. Third, RAU26 corrects a persistent algorithmic edge case. It permanently removes the punitive default grades historically applied to domainless entities in a corporate portfolio. These 3 modifications are specific mathematical adjustments designed to force global risk scoring to capture true operational severity rather than passive configuration. Administrators will not have to wait until the July deadline to calculate these impacts. Bitsight will provide active preview data months in advance. RAU26 forces organizations to adjust their risk models by evolving the algorithm from passive configuration checks to dynamic absolute risk evaluation. To understand the mechanics of this shift, we begin by deconstructing the evolution of Bitsight's email security assessment. In April 2024, Bitsight introduced tracking for domain-based message authentication, reporting, and conformance, commonly known as DMARC. Initially, this was deployed strictly as an ungraded, non-rating impacting informational vector. This radial graph maps the treatment of email security. Under RA26, DMARC officially transitions into an actively graded variable alongside SPF and DKIM. In its newly graded state, the DMARC node strictly enforces and quantifies alignment between the existing SPF and DKIM controls. Email spoofing and phishing remain the primary entry points for network breaches. Verifying alignment provides a direct, measurable indicator that active anti-spoofing controls are functioning correctly. To integrate this verification mathematically, DMARC will assume a 1% risk vector weight within the overall scoring algorithm. Because the grading model operates as a closed 100% system, adding a new 1% weight requires a corresponding reduction elsewhere. To accommodate DMARC, the weight of the compromised systems vector is dynamically reduced from 27% down to 26%. The existing weights for both the SPF and DKIM risk vectors remain unchanged in the new calculation. By firmly enforcing DMARC alignment, the algorithm mathematically pivots its focus to actively quantify and measure true spoofing and phishing prevention. The second major architectural update addresses exactly how RAU vulnerability risk impacts an organization's overall rating. Under RAU26, the current patching cadence risk vector is entirely replaced and formally renamed to Critical Vulnerability Management, or CVM. This Cartesian chart maps the methodological flaw of the legacy model. The old patching cadence metric evaluated compliance speed through a uniform decay, penalizing an organization over time without heavily distinguishing the actual severity of the flaw. Critical Vulnerability Management abandons this linear model for a severity duration matrix. Severe exposures with a high CVSS score trigger a precipitous, immediate grade penalty. Conversely, the algorithm reduces the drag effect of long-running, low-severity findings, flattening the curve. To ensure the data feeding this matrix is absolutely current, Bitsight will refresh CVSS scores across the board alongside the update. Security performance management customers can already view a selective preview of this CVM grade impact inside their application, identifying exactly which current vulnerabilities will hit their score the hardest. This shift isolates and penalizes true exposure, removing the statistical noise created by mere administrative sluggishness on trivial software bugs. CVM realigns the score with absolute real-world risk, ensuring a critical open port damages a rating distinctly and severely. The final structural change resolves a critical algorithmic edge case affecting email-focused risk vectors. The edge case involves corporate entities that lack associated domains entirely, such as non-operating holding companies or silent subsidiaries that do not send email. This data table displays the problem within the current pre-RAU logic. Entities with 0 domains auto-populate with punitive defaults, assigning an F grade for SPF and a C grade for DKIM simply for lacking gradable data. These defaults create an artificial drag on a broader corporate portfolio rating. The algorithm punishes the parent organization for failing to secure email infrastructure that the subsidiary does not actually possess. RAU 26 executes a strict computational shift. Entities with no domains bypass the default failure completely, receiving an NA grade. This non-punitive variable functions as a perfect score, allowing the portfolio rating to recover. This non-punitive NA logic is already active for the DMARC risk vector in all cases where there is insufficient gradable data. The boundary condition for this rule is absolute. If an entity does have registered domains, the existing default grades and standard grading rules apply without exception. Correcting this edge case stops the algorithm from penalizing deliberate, structural business configurations, resulting in a cleaner and highly accurate aggregate risk score. RAU 26 is a total realignment of the core equation Bitsight uses to model cyber risk. The update rests on 3 pillars: active enforcement of DMARC alignment, the severity-driven CVM matrix, and eliminating punitive defaults for domainless entities. Ignoring these mathematical shifts until they go live will result in immediate, unexpected rating drops for static organizations. To mitigate this, administrators must utilize the 3-month preview window to audit their environments. Exactly 3 months prior to the launch, starting April 16, 2026, Bitsight will grant users full access to the RAU 26 preview dashboards. Vendor risk management and security performance management professionals must use these dashboards to analyze their own infrastructure and their vendor portfolios against the revised math. Organizations should prioritize the remediation of high CVSS vulnerabilities immediately. The new CVM curve will aggressively penalize those exact exposures the moment the algorithm updates. Security teams must audit third-party vendors for DMARC alignment right now, ensuring they configure DNS records before the 1% penalty registers across the portfolio. The definitive go-live date for this entirely new mathematical risk model is officially set for July 16, 2026. Maintaining a high security rating requires understanding the math of the threat landscape and adapting infrastructure before the computational model forces the change.